So, after the previous episode, you would think that the next episode couldn't be as good, but I'm here to tell you that this episode is probably just as good, if not better, than the previous episode. So, there's a lot that we really need to go over, so let's dive right into this breakdown. Hey guys, how's it going? It is your boy, Manga Mandrew, and I'm here to do my manga breakdown and review for My Hero Academia, the final season, Season 8, Episode 4. This is a doozy of an episode as we tackle the ending of the fight between Bakugo and All For One, as well as we dive into the backstory of All For One himself. All of that and more I'm going to be doing in this breakdown and review, so if you want to see more content like this and like seeing this very beautiful face, I'd like to ask you, if you haven't done so, to subscribe to my YouTube channel and leave a like and hit that notification bell to be notified for whenever I upload more content like this. And without the way, let's dive right into the episode. And to start off, the episode's titled Quirk Explosion, which takes its name from manga chapter 409, and this episode covers new material from chapters 407, 408, 409, and the first 8 pages of 410. And unlike with previous episodes, we jump right into the title card and right into new stuff for the episode. And to start off, the episode starts off with an anime original sequence, as it is revealed that he, All For One, and Yoichi are quote-unquote identical twins, even though they have a more fraternal feel in nature. We get the extended sequence from the manga that adds in 2 random people trying to help this woman who is confirmed to be the mother of All For One and Yoichi, as we go over to their assumed dead bodies before being overtaken by flooded water. And this is a very important sequence, especially with the sequence starting off, which confirms that they are identical twins by having the one singular embryo separated into 2 and then into 2 different individuals, which is how identical twins are more or less created, while fraternal twins are more of 2 separate eggs that both get fertilized at the same time. However, it is confirmed that the reasoning why they are most likely so different and what leads to the reveal of Yoichi actually having a quirk is because even as a child, All For One was siphoning off the nutrients of his younger brother, and by doing so, really just shows how much All For One's nature is actually fueled by his birth. Also, tying into what they added to the anime, what I really like about this small addition of these 2 random people is that it shows the difference between what My Hero Academia's world was before the advent of quirks and meta abilities and what it was after, and how people were more willing to help a random person because the ideals of heroes didn't really exist, while in the present, relatively speaking, the same type of people wouldn't have batted an eye at a little kid walking around and would assume that a hero would have helped him. So I really like that they added this scene because it really adds to the themes and the main idea of what it means to be a hero in the world of My Hero Academia. However, the anime also does deviate from the manga as well by not including the narration on what the mother was doing in her life, as well as what happened to the babies, as well as her quirk in this sequence. And something else that the anime does is that it changes something that is implied with the mother. Because in the manga, it is pretty much stated that she did not know that she was pregnant at the time. In the manga, the anime very much heavily implies that she knows that she's pregnant and really shows that she's more along in her pregnancy in the anime than it is in the manga, which makes it even more critical that she's drinking alcohol knowing that she's pregnant. So I really like the small changes that they've made at the beginning of the episode, as well as one final small change, which is that the anime animates the baby inside of the womb opening up his eye and showing that this baby is in fact All For One, because the baby has the same blank, clear, cloudy eyes as All For One has in both the past and the present. And that is only what we get before the opening begins, and afterwards we get the explanation, very much like in the manga, about how it's revealed about the quirks and the luminescent or glowing baby, and how that was the announcement to the world that quirks existed, and how the announcement of the quirk users being different from regular humans caused chaos to erupt, which is very much what it was like in the manga. However, the anime adds a short sequence that shows how the announcement caused the division by showing two sides, one with and one without quirks, which shows how they have been divided, if not cut in half, and how that came into the people who didn't have quirks hating on the quirk, or in this instance, the meta ability users, which actually erupted the chaos into more blood and destruction. We see that blood and destruction in full view as we cut over to a group of meta haters as they are confronted by All For One, knowing most likely that he has a quirk, but are unwilling to kill him and leave him alone, but All For One is not giving them the same. We see All For One brutally and without mercy kill all of these individuals, and how it's very similar to the manga with a few added details and really just showing how gory this scene is. However, it is a little bit more censored in the anime with the shading of the characters with the more brutal attacks, but it is very much as brutal as it was in the manga. But with that brutal scene, something else that the anime does cut is the more in-depth explanation of what happened with All For One's mother, and how they cut out the narrator talking about how they were washed down the river before rats could even eat their bodies, and a little bit more detail surrounding the birth of All For One and Yoichi, which does not really take away from the story, but it would have been nice to have that added in. But because we have such a short timeline and we need so much stuff within each episode, unfortunately certain things had to be cut. But while we do not get the scene of All For One's mother being washed away by the river and being attacked by rats, what we also get is another scene after this, where we get a scene that is slightly expanded upon, where we see All For One just killing a bunch of people while stealing their quirks, which is expanded upon in the anime than it was in the manga, as we get the first proper view of Yoichi as a kid, as we see that he's being abused and treated as property by All For One, very much like in the manga. And how we also get the sequence of where both Yoichi and All For One are inspired by the comics to be a hero and villain respectively. But I like how the anime has this entire sequence done well, but also clarifies a few points, such as All For One dragging Yoichi's body as if he's an object, as well as making small changes to All For One and Yoichi's living arrangement, as well as showing that All For One is more or less living alongside Yoichi in the anime, versus Yoichi being on his own and All For One just coming to visit, as it seems to be like in the manga. However, what is very much the same between the anime and the manga is what comes next, with All For One with a short time skip in this flashback of Yoichi beginning to learn how to read more, as All For One comes in, where it's revealed that he killed the luminescent or glowing baby and stole his quirk, and this baby became a leader of a movement to try and unify humanity and to give people with quirks more autonomy, and for them to no longer be hated and for the world to be peaceful towards them. All For One straight up kills him and steals his quirk because he wants to be the center of attention and he wants everyone to look at him, and where he gets the conviction of being the demon lord that rules over all of humanity. And what I like about a small added detail in this sequence is how, very much like in the manga, we see that All For One is glowing in this moment, but in the anime, they make his glow be the same glow as the moon, which is most likely due to the idea of the luminescent or glowing baby having a glowing like aspect, very similar to how the moon is luminin or glowing in the sky. and that this was also done with a cool animation sequence of him coming into view of Yoichi from the perspective of the moon as he blended in with the moon. So it's moments like this that I really much enjoy My Hero Academia's anime adding these small flourishes that really add to the sequences and are just very cool. This is where we get to the midpoint break of the episode, where we're getting something a little different. Because we get, once again, another assumed anime original sequence that confirms information that we either knew or could have guessed about All For One giving Yoichi his name because he viewed Yoichi as his property, and obviously you would give name to your property. That sounds horrible because it is. However, the sequence actually is more or less heavily inspired by the memory that Deku saw when he began to commune with the previous users of One For All. This is shown in chapter 193 or episode 90, season 5, episode 2. We see the explanation as well as the interactions between All For One and Yoichi. We actually see in that episode of All For One giving Yoichi his quirk. However, that sequence is completely different from the sequence that we get in this episode. However, there are similarities such as like how it's done and the certain dialogue options that he says. However, a lot of dialogue is cut from this sequence that we saw in the previous one, which could be considered a retcon due to the fact that it was a memory and memories can be altered over time, as well as you could assume that All For One as well as Yoichi are not the best or most accurate when it comes to their narration of the stories, and All For One could just be an unreliable narrator. I would not say that it necessarily takes away from the story itself, and actually adds a little bit of information that we could have guessed but is now confirmed. But overall, I really did enjoy this scene and the scene that follows, which is very much like in the manga of All For One killing his younger brother in front of Kudo, as well as the reveal of the quirk being transferred over to Kudo. But after the break, we do get All For One reflecting on the fact that his brother's quirk is gone, the one that he gave him, and he comes to the realization very much in the same line that Kudo does, that his brother existed and transferred his quirk to Kudo. And the same is when Kudo is revealed that he has 2 quirk factors as well. And something else that the anime does is that it adapts this scene perfectly, as well as the next one. It does so by really conveying something that can only work in the manga and transferring it over to the anime. For instance, in the manga, we see Yoichi in a page where everything is split in half. One side, which is a reflection of All For One, and another, which is a reflection of Kudo. And how Kudo's side has more antagonistic qualities toward All For One, while the All For One side is more comforting and more reflective of the good that Yoichi thought All For One has. And how that is conveyed in the anime by showing them being flipped in between the good and bad reflections of All For One that Yoichi has. While the anime can't do it like the manga, what it's able to do is convey a similar scale and feeling, which really just shows how conflicted Yoichi is and how even towards the very end still believed that there was good inside of All For One. However, that ideal may get washed away with the perfect execution of the big double page spread that we see in the manga, showing how All For One went after every user of One For All to get back his brother. And we see that every sequence is very much mimicked in the panels of that page in the anime proper, with very few moments cut or even excluded completely, with the anime really adding more to how the users are using their quirks in the anime versus what was in the manga, even to the point of showing their actual deaths and having the quirks being used in their death moments, such as with Kudo using Fajin, Banjo using Black Whip, and even in using smoke, which is the biggest difference as he's cut in half and the smoke blows out of his cut pieces, which is in the anime but not in the manga. So yes, the anime did this moment spectacular, even to the moment of All For One being quote unquote killed by All Might, and the anime adding a small little additional sequence of the perspective of All For One from the body bag, quote unquote, looking up at Garaki, pretty much confirming that while he was in a body bag that is used for corpses, he was still alive in that moment. So that's a cool addition, and I really like, once again, how the anime is willing to add these small changes to really add to the story that it's telling. And it's from here where we pretty much cut to the present, where the flashback pretty much ends. And this is where we have All For One coming to the realization that Bakugo is actually not Kudo, but is most likely the inherited wheel which has transcended time and space. As we get, once again, another anime original scene that visually confirms the dialogue that All For One has about killing not just Kudo's close friends and family, but also potential children and lovers that are associated with him, basically ending his bloodline. Which, once again, small changes adds to the story, such as this one, as we also get All For One thinking of his options of whether or not he should be able to escape or try to send Bakugo away, but chooses neither and decides to go full force and try to kill Bakugo with his Omni Quirk Factor All For One attack. What I really like about this sequence is that, unlike other sequences in anime where you have this large scale mass of creature or people, instead of them using CGI to make it, this seems to be more hand-drawn 2D animated, which is what I wasn't expecting, even just seeing this scene depicted in the opening. However, they seem to have drawn it in 2D and it looks monstrous, even to the point of it being animated so well of him using a quirk to fire him off, and you really feel the speed and the impact and the destruction that would come from it if it actually landed on potentially Tomura or even Bakugo in this moment. But luckily enough, Bakugo is unfazed as we get something amazing. Because as All For One is going full monster mode in this seemingly 2D animated sequence, we get an impressive showing of Bakugo and what he's able to do with explosive sweat as he plans on landing an ultimate attack on All For One, his howitzer impact. And it's here where we get to see the well-animated barrage explosions that Bakugo is able to land on All For One, as we also get to see that All For One explodes from the inside because Bakugo shot out his sweat using the raindrops into All For One's mouth and hoping for the reaction of his body to eventually set it off, which allows him to have enough time to halt All For One and deliver these devastating and well animated attacks. And as this is all happening and All For One is beginning to lose control of his quirks, as we see the reappearance of the Hawk's vestige telling All For One that he's so weak that he's lost control of the vestiges, which means he's no longer able to use the quirks properly, we get the spectacular animation of Bakugo landing the near finishing move on All For One, very much like in the manga, with the slight difference of not clearly seeing Bakugo's arm going at a 90-degree angle backwards as in the manga. However, the anime does show that his arm is broken and that the gear on his arm has completely blown off, showing that it's no longer stabilized and is heavily injured. Once again, this form of censorship is most likely so that it doesn't get a higher rating, but still not straying from the potential goriness that is not clearly depicted. It's just showing how broken Bakugo's arm is without it being explicit. But it's here where we approach the end of the episode, where we get the quote-unquote final All For One monologue of his wants to reclaim Tomura's body and his younger brother, with the anime adding a small segment of Tomura giving a clapping hand sequence as a giving of prayer that All For One is quote-unquote dead, with a huge smile, as we also get an animated vestige of All For One clinging not just to Tomura, but as well as to his younger brother, really just showing how obsessive he has been, and that his main goal was not truly just dominating everyone, but dominating everyone with his younger brother by his side. And it's how it's revealed that this monologue is all in All For One's head, because he has become a baby who, if you didn't know, are unable to talk and speak actual words. As that is happening, we do see Bakugo, who is moments away from falling down, but gains the resolve to stand back up and see through to the death of All For One. As All For One uses his only quirk left at this moment, the spike quirk that he stole from his mother, to try and kill Bakugo, but Bakugo bites down and explodes the spike, reverting All For One to being no more than just a fetus, a cell, and then non-existent. Basically, this moment is the pinnacle meme of coughing baby versus atomic bomb. And yeah, it's very apt in that moment. And something that I want to bring up, while this is a very cool scene, the anime did drop the ball a little bit with the silhouette of Bakugo being quote-unquote stabbed and the blood spurt being perceived as blood in both the anime and the manga. However, the manga reveals that that blood is actually explosions that was used to destroy the spike, but in the anime, we don't clearly see that happening. So in that moment, in the anime, Bakugo randomly shoots blood out of his mouth or whatever, but we don't really see the source of it. Once again, rule of cool, so it will be excused. Speaking of cool, as All For One has been defeated, we have the final part of the episode of Bakugo falling to the ground, but still giving the final All Might pose as the ending begins, and we see the preview for the next episode. But yeah, this was a great episode. I loved it from start to finish. I love the small flourishes that they added to the episode. I love how, once again, this episode is well animated from beginning to end. And I just love that they gave Bakugo a big, bombastic fight that really adds to, really solidifies who he is as a character and who All For One was as a character. But hey, this is just my thoughts, opinions, and breakdown on this episode. So let me ask you this. What did you think of the episode? Did you like it? Did you dislike it? And do you think that All For One is actually dead? Leave your thoughts down below, and don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel for more content like this. Do all that cool jazz, and hopefully I'll be able to catch you in my next video. Goodbye!